Hello, Bermuda, and welcome back to another episode of Nurturing Our Nation, the Imperfect Parenting series. We are here today for our fourth panel discussion. So we're just over the halfway mark, and we have had some truly knowledgeable panelists, and they've shared so much information. So far, we have discussed routines, boundaries, and the effects of bullying and domestic violence on children. So if you haven't had the opportunity to view those episodes, you can go back and view them. They are on our social media channels. And if you go to gov.bm and search in Nurturing Our Nation, Imperfect Parenting Series, they will pull up as well. So today we have another impactful panel, and we're going to be discussing something very relevant in parenting, which is nurturing parents and co-parenting. So all the family, parents, friends, and everyone that is tuned in today, if you have questions or comments, you can feel free to leave them below. We'll show them on the screen and try to answer as many as we can. If not, you can email them to askus@gov.bm and we can review them. Also, please share this with your village as we are live now, so maybe someone can tune in on their lunch break. At this time, I'm going to welcome the Minister of Social Development and Seniors, the Honorable Tanae Farbert, to give us a warm welcome.
Thank you, Alicia, and good afternoon, Bermuda. Alicia, I can't believe already that we are halfway through our series. But I am very thankful to the team and the panelists who've been instrumental in bringing together this community and resource. As Alicia already highlighted, we've discussed routines, boundaries, and the effects of bullying and domestic violence on children. Today, we will have a meaningful and solutions oriented discussion on co parenting and nurturing parents. Co parenting is something that many families are experiencing, and we believe that providing parents, caregivers, and families with resources of support is crucial. Our October parenting tip of the month is to admit when you make a mistake or lose your cool. Children observe the relationship between their parents, family members, friends, and acquaintances. Model how to apologize, take responsibility for your actions, and make amends when necessary. The topic of co parenting and nurturing parents is so important because children model behaviors. Our children deserve to grow up knowing they are loved, that their parents can work together to love and raise them. So, without further ado, I want to introduce our amazing panelists who will dive much deeper into this topic and provide realistic, actionable tips for parents and caregivers. Today, we are joined by Dr. Sharon Apopa, family counselor at the Child Development Program, Dr. Sandy De Silva, executive director at the Family Center, Sharice Carey, counselor at the Family Center, Darren Francis, social worker at the Department of Child and Family Services, Kenton Trott, police inspector at Bermuda Police Service, and of course, Ms. Judith Brooks, family clinician at Beyond Therapy. Thank you, panelists.
Okay, so let's get right into this episode. Thank you to everyone who has joined us. We're going to get some really good answers today. So, before we go into co parenting, can we first take a look at nurturing parents? So, from your perspective, are you able to share what attributes make someone a nurturing parent?
The best attribute is love. It's the foundation for everything that will follow. So if you love your child and you use loving approaches, that sets the stage for how you will nurture.
And I'm happy to add to Judith Brooks' comments, just in terms of, ensuring that that love is expressed in an unconditional way, that you don't retract love or care because behaviors are being expressed that are not to your liking, but instead we actually want to ensure that regardless of what the behaviors are or actions are that we do, we're there to love and care for children and to pass on our values so that they grow up knowing and understanding who they are and their environment and what legacies and family traditions and culture that they come from, what's the history that they come from. And then just to add to that as well, just empathy and sensitivity to their needs. And I think it's just as a parent myself that it's hardest to be most sensitive. Their needs clash with your needs. So those are times to really put on the unconditional love hat, and ensure that we are addressing their behaviors and their needs in as sensitive a manner as possible, so that they do not feel like they are being judged as people.
That's great. So, do we have maybe just a few tips that we can give to parents if, let's say, today they want to become more nurturing? Like, what's something they can do as a part of perhaps their daily routine?
Yeah, I think one of the important things is being child centered, focusing on the needs of your child at any given point in time in the day, and being able to interpret their behavior in terms of what it is that they're communicating that they need or want at any given point in time.
I was thinking about the tip that was given in terms of apologizing. And I think what I would add to that is giving second chances, both to children and ourselves. Have a chance to have a do-over and try something again. If we didn't say something the way that we wanted to, or they could have said or done something differently, to give a second chance to try it again, um, is a way to nurture and um, and connect with them.
Another
Yeah,
area
and
of
another,
focus. Go ahead.
sorry, I think another important part is undivided attention. I know that especially nowadays with technology and phones and laptops and this and that, sometimes we can get so easily distracted. And I mean, I have my daughter, she would tell me all the time, Daddy, put your phone on, you're not listening. So we have to make sure that we're giving that undivided attention to them so that they can express how they feel, and so that you can really hear what they're trying to say. Because they might be, for example, acting out because you're so busy on your phone. They know that they get your attention when they act out, because then you put your phone down because you got to deal with them. So if we make sure to give that undivided attention, and that's one of the things that I practice personally myself as well, is especially, sometimes I might say, oh, look, guys, Daddy just has to make a quick phone call. I'll be back in a minute. But when you're talking to them, when you're in your room with them, when you're in the car with them, when you're at the playground with them, just give them that undivided attention so that you can really understand what their needs are and also be able to explain to them what your needs are.
Also, loving is not easy, and it requires a commitment when you have children and you tell them that you love them. You're making a commitment, and you need to live out that commitment. And what my fellow panelists are describing is what that commitment looks like, what the content looks like. One of the things that I have found as a parent educator is to encourage parents to have a parenting plan. Parenting is not something you want to wing. It's something you want to plan and organize yourself with and set achievable, appropriate, measurable goals so that when you are having success, it can undergird the times when the loving isn't easy as a parent.
Thank you. Are there any perhaps services that we can revert parents to if they want to learn more about becoming a nurturing parent, or any online resources for those who want to implement this, in their lives immediately?
Is that a direct question to me or the
Well,
panel?
you can speak to perhaps, is that Dr. Popo?
Pardon? Yeah, so I was just going to respond
Dr.
to
Pod.
the resources. So definitely at Child Development Program, we do provide support services to parents for children between the age of birth to 5 years old. And particularly recently, we've seen that we've had to do a lot of work focusing around this whole topic of co-parenting, looking at it from the individual components of what each parent brings to the table, as well as sometimes some of the legal concerns that are raised. So definitely, if your child is between 0 and 5, then a support service can be found at Child Development Program.
And then I was waiting for my fellow CDP panelists to speak, just to tag then from 4 to 18. So we do overlap from that 4 to 5 age range. At Family Center, we do have counseling services at no charge to families. But most importantly, sort of the screening process. So if you are even unsure about what you need and you're just feeling challenged in a particular parenting area, or there's a concern with your child that has been unable to be addressed by, like, maybe your school support system, your family support system, friend support system, then the screening process just allows for information gathering and decision making with the family as to whether Family Center is the best match in terms of the services that you need or where else you may go. The other thing we've also seen is this huge increase in schools providing resources for, like, parent presentation topics. So I know we've had a lot of requests at Family Center from schools across the island who call us and say, this particular area is coming up a lot with our student population, our parent population. Can you please present? And so there, look out for advertised workshops and presentations through your school network. The churches and other places like community centers are also doing it as well. And then, of course, we do have the internet, which does have a lot of resources as well. But just make sure that the resources you're reading, are good ones and they match your family values.
Yes, and Alicia, I guess I should put in a plug for the fact that coming up the first week in November, every Tuesday, we will be Child Development offering a program for effective parenting for fathers. So if you're a father and you have a child between birth and the age of 5, we will actually be presenting a series of topics looking at how fathers can be more effective in their parenting and their interactions with their children. So they can also, anybody who's listening can also reach out to CDP if you would like to be a part of that experience for the month of November.
Yes, that's going to be a very, very good series. So thank you for sharing those resources. And we are having the Parenting Expo on November 10th. So we are going to have lots of vendors there in person speaking on behalf of their organization. So we encourage parents, to save that date as more information is coming. But at this time, I want us to let's go right into co-parenting. For those who may not know, let's start off with, defining what co-parenting is. So this could be for anybody.
I haven't spoken yet, so yeah. I mean, to me, co-parenting is quite simply uh, two parents being able to raise a child when the parents don't live in the same home, and the child is either so I've known a few different co-parenting situations where so one could be where a child or children um, remain in the matrimonial home or remain at one home, and the parents switch out. So the parents might be there, one parent might be there for a week, and then they will switch out, go to an apartment they have or another home that they have. And then the other parent will come into the home so that that parent can then do a week of parenting. And what that does is it allows the child to be stationed at one place so they don't have to do a whole lot of moving and shifting around, and they could be saddled. And then the parents are the ones that have to, change their routines and adjust to that particular situation. And then you have, I think, what is more typical, which is basically the child moving from house to house. So, I've heard of situations where parents do one day on or one day off, which is kind of is a bit much. But then you have week on, week off, and I have no problem saying that I am a co-parent, and I do a week on, week off. I have my son. I pick him up from school. or he makes his way to me from school Monday afternoon, and then I get him back to school the following Monday morning, and then his mom takes over, whatnot. So yeah, that's what I would define co-parenting as.
Alicia, I'd like to take a more non-traditional definition of the topic, and it's probably my age on this panel, but I would like to define co-parenting as well as what I've seen is the two persons in the same household, so it may be grandmother and mother, and they're both assisting in raising the child. And of course, based on their generational differences and whatever, you find that they come to the table with different behaviors, expectations, discipline, and things like that. So co-parenting in a non-traditional sense, sometimes it's when we have the biological parent and an extended family member within the same home, both providing parenting support to the child. So that's the other aspect of it that I think is important to acknowledge, especially in Bermuda, and especially since COVID, where a lot of people have become housed and insecure and have had to
Multi-generational
move back
house.
in with other relatives. It's really, it's presented at our table. I want to respect my mom, I honor her and all, but she doesn't understand that giving licks anymore is not the way to go. So how, they want to know, how do I balance the difference between respect and my right as a biological parent. So I think that might be helpful for us to review in some ways as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. That co-parenting definitely takes place with both parents in the home, but yeah, so we all have our different perspectives. That's a good
Yeah.
point, though.
Yeah. And another non-traditional view is we have seen it in Bermuda where people step up to care for children and have no blood relationship with the child, and may find themselves in caring for the child in support with someone else. And that someone else can change from time to time if there's no stable second person in the child's life. But that also is more common than we understand and non traditional for co parenting.
Okay,
And
these
then
are some really good definitions. Do you want to add to that, Dr. Sandy?
sure, yeah. The only thing I guess I would add is um, that often we have to remind ourselves that a co-parenting relationship of any of the forms just described by the panelists focuses on the child. And I think we forget that. And I know that's what I'm sure we're going to talk about with further questions, how it often goes back to the relationship between the adults who are parenting as opposed to focusing on the child. So I just wanted to add that piece as I know we go into these other questions. So that's
Yeah.
the should of the co-parenting relationship definition.
Yeah, so it actually goes right into a question that I want to ask about, what is the importance of having a unified front for children? So whether it's, biological parents or that extended immediate family or, significant others coming into co-parents' lives, for everyone to have, a united front. Um, what would you say is the importance of that for the child?
It means the young person has less messages to filter about what's supposed to happen on the day to day, or not sifting through what's important. If there's some agreement around some priorities, maybe not everything, and it kind of creates like a surround sound about what the expectations are. So it really helps, and it makes everyone's job easier.
Yes, I think additionally, children thrive in environments where there's consistency. And when they are in going between homes where there are different rules, expectations, and things like that, sometimes it can impact on the children's mental health. It can cause them to be very anxious and things like that there. So as much as possible, consistency is very important to the stabilization of the child's mental health as well.
And also, you can get a sense of when you are not being consistent by following uh, the understanding or the cue that Dr. De Silva offered, being child focused. If you find yourself at odds or in just let's use just at odds with between the two parents, one of the things that can be a cue for you in being at odds, the first thing you should ask yourself is, am I being child focused? Is the other person being child focused? That will help you to get on the page that you need to be quicker than anything else. Because once you come off the child focused page, you start walking on the adult page with all its difficulties and past history.
Yeah.
I guess, Alicia, I also should add to what I said in beginning. It's going to sound contradictory, but it's really not. At the end of the day, we can all only be responsible for what happens in our own homes. So when I talk about, the importance of consistency between the homes, basically when we drill down to the bottom, you can provide the consistency that you can within the environment that you have, regardless of what is done in the next parent's home. If you provide that consistency, children will then, they're flexible. They'll be able to understand what to expect when they're at mom's house and what to expect when they're at dad's house. So even though we're saying consistency is important, I don't want parents to stress themselves out because we cannot control somebody else's environment. You know?
That's
Yeah. And I just want to add a little bit of hope that sometimes we have a united front. We often have very similar goals for children, and we're not actually arguing about the what. If we're arguing, in terms of grades or health, sometimes what we're arguing about is the how and the process and how we get there. But we sometimes already have more of a united front than we think.
So yeah, so that is a part of, living in the two separate households. And like you're saying, it's not necessarily the what. Like, yes, we want our children to be educated. Yes, we want them to be healthy. But how is going to be, it's going to be individual perspective as to how they were raised, the type of foods that they might want to eat, or bedtimes, or all of these different things that are changing. So can we discuss a bit about if the households are not on the same page, right? How can it impact the child? Um, and then maybe how they can go about trying to like resolve some of this, so like problem solution.
Well, one thing that we typically see here, and this is just one thing that can possibly be a negative impact to the child. Um, what we tend to see is that if there are two parents that are co-parenting and are not on the same page, they don't get along, there's contention or whatnot, the child then can start to split and start to manipulate their, a child, they're going to seek the easiest
Half
path,
of
you know
that.
what I mean? Right. Path of least resistance. So what they tend to do is they tend to sort of figure out that, okay, they don't like each other, they barely talk to each other, they don't have that communication with each other. So I know that I can tell one parent one thing, tell the other parent another thing, and I just navigate my way through the middle of all of that. And you know what I mean? Sometimes that's a negative thing, sometimes it's a good thing, because they learn how to be resilient and resourceful. However, but it does put the child in a place where they can manipulate situations, and then once the parents figure it out, it then becomes another element to the co-parenting that could be, like I said, good or bad.
Yes, it can be chaotic. The result of the manipulation and playing parents against each other, it can be chaotic. And what also I have seen occur, especially when the children are like late elementary and middle school, I start to get a sense that the child actually begins raising themselves in the midst of the manipulation. So neither parent has any real um, impact to bring about what they may want for the child at that time. If the child has been given enough rope or space to take matters into their own hands that adults should be holding in their hands.
And I think another thing that I've observed, and maybe at the very extreme end of this whole situation, is children sometimes have a difficulty interpreting what's really going on in the relationship between the parents. So a while ago, when I was at Child and Adolescent Services, we had a 6-year-old boy who went to school and he took a knife with him, and his intention was to harm himself. Luckily, another little pokey child in the classroom saw the knife in his bag and told the teacher. But when we interviewed the young boy who was only 6, he said, my daddy and mom are always arguing and fighting about me. So I thought if I was no longer here, my parents would be happy. So in that chaos, because children don't have the ability sometimes to interpret the
That is not a
behavior
whole
between
thing,
the
no.
parents, they internalize it and think that they're the cause of the problem. And then it affects again their whole feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, which can lead again to mental health issues.
Yeah.
Yes. And very,
And
very well said.
yeah, and they certainly can feel responsible for fixing it or take on undue responsibility for trying to repair adult stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm
which
just
is
gonna
I
go.
think
We
why
have
it
a.
should.
Oh, go ahead, Dr. Sadie. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, which is why it's so important, I think, even before getting onto the same page as people who are parenting from different households, is you need to redefine your relationship with one another, because all of the panelists' comments to this just now have all been about where the conflict between the two adults remains, and in fact can even get worse. And I know in one of we deliver a co-parenting and blended families group at Family Center, and we tend to start session one with what was the point of not parenting together, not being able to do that, if the conflict just continues and sometimes escalates even further post, deciding that this is not going to work for us in this relationship. So redefining that relationship so that the children then see you as their parents, not as two fighting adults for over them or for whatever reason.
Yes. And
Okay,
a
so
little tip that someone had told me when I was taking a training a couple of months ago, they were saying that when you have parents with high conflict, the tip is to take a picture or photo of the child and put it in the middle of them
Yeah.
so that they can keep on refocusing themselves on why we are here in the first place and what the meeting is about. And they were saying that it's really, really powerful because the parents, every time they look at the picture, it helps them to refocus. You don't have to keep them saying anything or redirecting them. So sometimes that's just a little tip to help parents when the conflict is high to say, what are we really here for? Put the picture right in the middle.
Yes, because children need predictability. No matter what is playing out around them, they need some form of predictability. And while uh, the chaos may be afoot, just healthy parenting on its own can offer some different constructs for the child. We're talking about co-parenting. We began the session about how to nurture parents, but really co-parenting can be at its best when parents can just be better parents rather than bitter parents.
okay, I want us to share some of the comments, questions that are coming online. So I'm going to show the first one on the screen. The Raj Tribe Bermuda is asking, is the term co-parenting only for two birth parents? Does it apply to legal guardians? Which I do believe we did elaborate a bit on that. But what they are looking for is if there's a policy or area of law that gives birth parents more rights concerning the child than the legal guardian.
No, I feel like Darren, if you can confirm this from a DCFS perspective, if you're the legal guardian, you actually then have the decision making rights of the child, because a birth parent may not be the legal guardian. So if you're a birth parent and there's not a legal guardian, by the very nature then of being the birth parent, you are. But if someone else has been established as the legal guardian, because the birth parent cannot take care of the child, then the legal guardian's rights are of parenting the child.
So yeah, so legally, um, co-parenting co-parenting could be any individual, any two individuals that have either legal or granted pretty much guardianship. Be same sex, it could be it could be anything. But usually there's a distinction made between custody and care and control legally. Custody is basically when custody basically refers to very, very important decisions that need to be made to about in regards to a child, and um, they usually is medical, religion, things of that nature. Uh, Whereas both parents have to be considered in terms of making this decision. And usually, when two parents can come to a reasonable decision as to those sorts of things, then the courts become involved. You go through a court hearing and whatnot, and then the courts would have to make that decision, which is not always the best thing. You don't really want that. Then you have care and control. Care and control is usually the parent or the household where the child is stays most of the time. So basically, if one parent has weekly care of a child and then the other parent maybe just have weekends or every other weekend, then the primary parent would be the parent that has care and control, and that parent is responsible for making decisions on the child's day-to-day things like what time he'll get up, what or he or she will get up, what time they'll be leaving the house, or extracurricular activities or things like that. So day-to-day stuff, that's usually the parent that has care and control.
So a legal guardian, yes, can be a part of a co-parenting relationship, and then they do
Right.
have the legal
Right.
rights.
So right. So here at DCFS, we have a foster care component or section, and basically, if there is a child that for whatever reason is cannot remain in their birth home or their parents' birth home, then the courts would make a decision whether or not that child has to be removed from that home, and then we utilize foster parents. When that is the case, the director of Child and Family Services is usually the parent. Um, and then we give that responsibility off to a foster parent. And the foster parent will be the one to make those day-to-day decisions. They would have the care and control pretty much. However, the birth parents would retain uh, custody, which means that they would still have some say in those major decisions.
Mhm. Okay, I think that was quite clear. So I feel like that answer was successful. I'm going to go
And
to another.
Alicia, can I just ask Darren? Isn't there another piece to legal guardianship where a legal guardian can somebody be the person who acts in assigned by the parent to act in the absence of the parent?
Yes, and that can be a legal situation, or it could be just an agreement that's made between the two individuals. Like I said, it could be a godma or a grandmother or whatnot. If a parent is unable to at the time, or is maybe off island or whatever reason, then yes. Usually, what how that works is that the birth parent would say write a letter expressing that they're giving temporary guardianship, care and control to another person. You usually have that ratified by the courts. You don't necessarily have to appear in court, but that can be ratified by the courts. And basically, that would serve as a legal document to say that I now have current control of this particular person temporarily.
Okay, thank you. This is an interesting question. So, granted that parenting styles vary, however, what does the panel think of a parent who has stated you have to put fear into the child so that they respect you? Would this be considered the right of the parent to treat the child this way? This is disruptive to mental health space of the child, nurturing, and creates conflict in the co-parenting space. So, does anyone want to touch that statement that you have to put fear into a child so that they respect you?
So
Um,
this is a real. I shouldn't even be brave enough to jump in here, but I think it starts with linguistics because I culturally sometimes we interchange the word fear with respect. Uh, and so we think that when we're saying we're building fear, it means that we're teaching children to respect. So it really depends on what that definition is. But if in fact they're saying that respect is a part of training a child as a parent, I think that I can concur with that. If they're defining fear as a sense of emotional terror or whatever, then we know that fear is actually an immobilizing force, and that when what we're doing when we're nurturing children, we're training them, they're building the skill sets and tools, and that when we become fearful, we can think of ourselves. We become fearful. We want to take a fight or flight mode. So instilling fear from that definition really will become too productive to the role of parenting, which is teaching our children skill sets in order so they can grow up to be independent thinkers and have the ability to cope and be thriving in our society. So that's the best I can put. I'm sure some of my learned friends can definitely expand on that.
I think that's one of the main challenges with co-parenting, being able to communicate about what do I mean when I'm talking about my parenting decisions with someone. How do we get to understand where our co-parent is coming from so we can negotiate here? Because it'd be very difficult for us to really weigh in a way that's meaningful and that we really don't have a lot of context, but it's all in the details, right? So this is where I think having conversations as co-parents about the how,
Yeah.
um, what do you mean by fear, right? Is this really
Is
getting
it
at
respect?
respect and how do we do that? Because I think probably both parents do believe, are probably both wanting to see respectful behavior and wanting to see a respectful response from your young person. So I think about what are the communication needs for the co-parents here.
So this might be a good time to circle back to the blended family workshop that Dr. Sandy spoke of. When does the Family Center offer that?
Okay. We create a schedule every year of a number of different parenting workshops. We've done two this year. We are likely to have at least two coming up next year. During the pandemic, we did them online, so you can look out for flyers coming up in 2023. And anyone is welcome to attend.
And you can email or call us to get on our emailing list so that,
Yeah,
as Sharice just said, you can actually get the schedule of them for the year
yeah,
as well. And we tend to send them out to schools, and they can get
yeah.
onto schools' newsletters, to DCFS, et cetera, so that you can look out for those dates. But they do tend to be in the spring. Is that right, Sharice? Like
Yes.
winter leading to spring is when these
Yeah.
particular ones get delivered.
So I'm thinking around April, but I would have to go back and look at our schedule to be sure. But we also release a flyer to the community. So if you're not on the list, don't worry. It's also going to be floating around at the time that it comes up.
Okay. I'm gonna take one more comment before we get back into our questions. Love that the panel is speaking truth about co-parenting to be child focused, a child focused responsibility. Is there actually an area of law that emphasizes this fact? So I don't know if it's an area of law that emphasizes it, but perhaps, Mr. Francis, I know we touched briefly on, going through the courts and stuff. So maybe for those parents who think, we're going to go to the court and kind of battle parent to parent, perhaps expand upon how the courts take it from a child-centered view.
Well, being child centered in terms of co-parenting, parenting in general is it seems like it's a you know what I mean. It's a matter of fact, like it's what's supposed to
It
happen.
should
Like that's how
be
you're
a
supposed to do it.
no-brainer. Yeah.
However, as in terms of in the legalities of that, there's no law that dictates uh, how you parent in that regard. You know what I mean? However, there are thresholds that need to be met in terms of if the parenting is if it's very punitive, and if there's a lot of aggression and stuff. So back to the previous question, which was about parenting through fear. So basically, um, you have to define what their fear is. If that child's fearing that they're gonna if they do something wrong, if they fear that they're going to lose their privileges, or if they fear that that's healthy, you know what I mean? Just supposed to be cause and effect. However, there can be some sort of aggression in terms of how you parent a child, and usually, what I've come to determine is that when a parent uses very corporal punishment, uses a lot of corporal punishment in their parenting, or a lot of fear-based in their parenting, it usually comes from the frustration that the parent has in terms of dealing with certain behaviors that a child may be displaying. And when they don't, when they can't really get a handle on this quickly, then it usually becomes a frustration. And what we try to do is try to encourage parents not to parent when they are frustrated, when they are having challenges with behaviors and whatnot. And so we have different tools, and the Family Center are really good with this in terms of providing parents with tools to utilize when they feel that they're in this particular space. But as far as the law is concerned, there is no particular way that the law figures that you should parent your child. There are just different thresholds as to what we feel to be unhealthy and puts the child at risk emotionally, mentally, physically. So once we start meeting thresholds that put a child at those particular risk levels, then DCFS is the agency that sort of investigates these things, monitors these things, and tries to help with interventions and link with services and whatnot. And once we get to a point where we're not making any headway, then we get into court, and we have the courts to uh, assist or be the oversight.
I
And to
guess
just
I
to
would
back on what Darren was saying, the everything all pieces of legislation are undergirded by the child welfare principle. So it's always making sure that the welfare of the child is okay. So it's not a law that says you have to do A, B, C, and D. But like Darren said, there's certain thresholds, and all those thresholds are based on the welfare principle of the child. So they want to make sure that the welfare of that child is okay. And that's where, the police will only get involved when it comes to the child welfare because as Darren was saying, it has to go through a lot of processes and procedures. And some people think, oh, well, I'm gonna call the police and the police are gonna do X, Y, and Z. No, at the end of the day, the welfare of the child, yes, the parents might be arguing and fussing and fighting, but the welfare of the child is what we always have to look at. And we've had a few rulings and stuff that demonstrate that the police must, at the end of the day, it's for the welfare of the child. And we can't get involved, we can't pick sides, we can't say, oh, well, I think today the mom is a better parent. No, tomorrow the dad is a better parent. That's not for us to decide. But at the end of the day, it's always about the welfare of the child.
There is an opportunity in the vehicle, though, within the Children Act for the court, if they feel that the proceedings are not child focused, to appoint a litigation guardian. And the role of the litigation guardian is to make sure that the voice of the child is clearly heard within all of the proceedings. So, that is one way that we can ensure that things are court proceedings are child focused by making sure that the voice of the child is heard. So we do have that opportunity, and it's something that I believe the courts are utilizing more frequently these days when the parents come in and make it all about themselves, that then the litigation guardian is appointed.
Mm.
And then just to add, there is an act we do have in Bermuda, I think that we don't pull often enough. It's the Parental Responsibility Act as well. So just to speak to that child welfare piece spoken to earlier. So there is a Parental Responsibility Act. We should probably all I know we get reminded as well when we come up with high risk situations involving the youth that we work with and parents, and helping parents to understand also the ramifications of the decisions that they make when trying to protect their children from high risk situations, but at the same time, maybe while keeping a child in a high risk situation. And then the only other thing that I was going to add is that the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child have actually added the right of a child to maintain strong relationships with both of their parents. So the move of that in 1989 was to actually honor the fact that, just by simply being born, that child has a right to hold relationships with both parents, regardless of what the parents feel about each other.
Thank you. So I'm gonna jump back in. Before we took some questions, we were discussing co-parenting between households and different ways that can create cohesiveness between the houses. So perhaps we can share a bit of tips on. I know we said like stability, although we can, and consistency. We can't control what happens in that other household. Are there simple things that you can focus on? So maybe if it's like bedtimes, or kind of like what structures look like? Like, what are some things that can maintain a flow for a child that he is alternating between two different spaces regularly?
Something that can be helpful is having a transition routine. I like to sometimes, like the way I like to frame it for parents is, imagine if you traveled for work as often as your young person changed homes. It can be really, really disruptive. And so having some kind of a, like a welcome back, this is how things are here, and giving some grace for getting back into the routine. And one way you can do that is offering some reminders, especially if they're just kind of getting back into things in your home, um, because they're getting used to start learning how to be a student. They're learning how to complete chores and get along with others, and they're doing it sometimes in two and sometimes even a third place. So we want to give a lot of grace and have some consistency, especially for um, leaving and returning. So it might be every time you unpack your bag, you have a snack. We make sure we have everything before we get back into the, and that's not easy. That's not easy to do that.
It's not easy. No,
Sometimes
no.
you're going
Even
straight
some
to dance.
basic,
So
yeah.
sometimes
Even the best of us have difficulty with that. You know what I mean?
it's not
Sometimes.
easy.
Right, that's
So,
right.
and I think that that's why that you have, that imperfect part is so important. I don't mean to do it perfectly. I just mean
Amy.
um, aiming for some consistency and covering the rest with some grace.
Yes, and in between there, I just want to use this that particular point to spring off into this is where parents need to work on strengthening the bond with that child. You know, we only talk about bonding with children in the early birthdays, but it's going on for a lifetime, this bonding process, right? And so right in that transitional period, it I have asked parents, working with co-parents, I have asked parents, can you figure out something that you do when the child returns home that has to do with relationship building? Do
Mm-hmm.
you hug 3 times? Do you kiss 3 times? Do you say I survived 3 times? Do you say it was good 3 times? Do you say it's getting better 3 times? I mean, do you sit down and have a bowl of grapes? Do you look at your favorite picture? What would help you to bond back, or let me put it this way, bounce back to bonding and roll forward in resilience?
You know, and that's interesting because usually, well, not usually, but sometimes the child will actually provide you with that avenue. Like, for instance, like my son, when he comes, when it's back to my house, he wants to tell me everything. He just wants to talk. He wants to be like, it's up behind me. He wants to talk. He wants to talk, and so I give him that opportunity to talk, and that's his way of acclimating himself back in. You know what I mean? He plays with his dog and all of that there, and so sometimes you just have to tune in to what they need and what they want, and what sometimes the cues that they're giving you are nonverbal. You know what I mean? And you just have to roll with it. I like to, and it don't always happen, but I like to ensure that his room is made up and neat and tidy when he comes, so that you know what I mean. He feels like when you go away, you go to a hotel, you go to the hotel
Come
room, you
back in
feel
the same
good.
room.
The AC is
Yeah.
blowing and the bed's made up and everything. You know what I mean? You feel makes you feel good. So so that's something that I like to do that I don't always do. I must admit. But yeah, that's one way too. Just tune in to what they're presenting to
What
you.
they need.
There might be something you say every time they come back. Every time. It's your thing
Yeah,
that you say.
yeah, yeah.
Another thing that I have asked some parents, and it's worked for them, is to have a communication board that goes with the
Mhm.
child from one home to the other and gives information about any critical points. One of the big challenges that parents have shared is because things change so rapidly, drop days, things like that, that if they're not communicated and the next parent doesn't know, it really is challenging for the child in terms of their fitting in. So having this communication book where you just jot down anything vital and important that will help the child to be successful the next week in the other home, and make sure that that goes with the child in their backpack or something every single week. So each parent has the ability to not miss those critical points for the child.
I like the communication book as well because it takes some of that actual direct communication pressure off. So sometimes if there's parents are struggling to even just talk to each other, so instead of you giving me da 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 da, and the parents like really
Yeah.
struggling with it, at least they can read it and kind of mitigate, some of this like hotspot
Yeah.
type of areas.
I would
Uh,
like to go. I would like to go back to something that Darren said. And Darren, I hope I'm not, you know, making it too personal. You shared, sometimes you're not kind of ready. The state of readiness,
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
state of readiness. And I want to speak to that. And because parents are listening, not just people who are co-parenting, but parents are listening. Transition periods are the key to paying attention to what's happening, not just with your household, but with you and your child. Example, I ask parents, listen, if you know there's a transition coming up, schedule 15 minutes to stop and think about what that transition can look like and has looked like. Has it always been positive? Is it something that's repetitive? Do I need to start at lunchtime to be on my own to just remind myself what I need to be ready for this evening? What disposition I need to prep myself to be in? What zone do I want to be in? What do I need to be
mhm.
careful about between now and when I see my child that I don't let it distress me? How can I circumvent it and have a real plan for this transition day, this transition time? Because then, even if the room is not ready, and when you get him, you're ready to hear him. Hey, he's going to hear that because your state of readiness is the state of readiness. When children find their parents in a healthy state of readiness for them, oh, love will abound, peace will
Yes,
abound,
yes, yes.
fun
Another.
will even come into play spontaneously. Couldn't help myself, sorry.
Yes, yes.
Share it, share it. We love it. The parents are finding all of these powerful tips useful. So thank you.
Another thing is basically, I mean, when possible, it's good to have, if he's got a PlayStation at his mom's, it's good for you to have a PlayStation at your house, but that's not always feasible. So when a child has to move between homes, and again, I'm conscious of this, and I practice this. I try to, but it doesn't always happen. But I try to make it whereas he's not going between houses with all of his stuff. You know what I
Everything.
mean? So
Yeah,
I would try to sort out a situation with the parent where his mom and I we would do the transfer without him being present. So that way when he finishes school and I'm picking him up or he's making his way to me or whatever, it's
Mhm.
just with his book bag and his football clothes or whatnot. You know what I mean? It's not
nice,
everything that is lugging back and forth.
nice,
And
nice.
so I take care of that. You don't worry about that. I'll deal with that. And so that makes the transition also a little
Yeah.
easier.
And so often we want to start with discipline. Sometimes we want to start with discipline, and you forgot this and you forgot that, and you're supposed to be responsible. But we can take so much off the plate to just have something
Let's
like an
take
extra
it.
power cord, some extra toiletries to just make it a little little
Easy.
easier.
Yep.
Because
Yeah,
literally, it's another skill to learn how to pack a bag,
yeah,
and to just take some of the pressure off that I know you're learning. Um, it
That
could just be
grace that you see at that
communication,
grace.
right? I know you're learning, and I know you're trying, and I'm willing to help you by having a little bit extra, or at least we're not going to penalize you because you forgot, because this is not a situation that they may have asked for.
yeah.
It's
Now,
Um,
really
now, if
visual.
he's got his homework book at his mom's house and has left it there, then that is his responsibility. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And he
right,
say, "Oh, I left it
right.
at my mama's house." Well, you were supposed to pack it and you're supposed to bring it. Now,
Yeah,
I
and I'm
might
not saying
assist you.
no responsibilities.
Yeah.
Right. So not everything, but there are some things that
Yeah.
you have to be responsible for. You know what I mean?
Nice, nice. I want to go back to the transition because it's really, really big, and I want to make it big in people's mind. And that when the transition is good, like Darren is describing, do you know there's less opportunity for parents to start writing in on what happened at your dad's house and who did he see and all of those inappropriate questions that children should not be involved in. So that good transition that we're talking about is more powerful than just the state of readiness. It also can be bank deposits that leave no room for craziness. I'm sorry, everybody went quiet.
No, well
No,
said.
No, but even with maybe perhaps visual aids, I know that we are any time of the internet. So if it's things that you can assist with, so like my 4-year-old, we do co-parenting and we're now on week off. So trying to get him kind of like it's almost like a countdown. So before the next week, this is how many days you have her, and then he kind of does things bit by bit. And then like once he gets back, it's also nice to just have the routine for this house somewhere visual. Because then sometimes it's like he might come back and he, depending on what type of week it's had, he might be grumpy, he might be happy, he might not really want to talk. So, like you said, kind of playing off of their cues. But if there are visual things that you can put up maybe in their rooms, they can have autonomy over how they create it, so that it's something that's kind of outside of just conversational, to help guide that transition a bit as well. Um, did anyone else have anything to add on transitions? Because I did want to get on a bit about communication and like conflict between parents and how to have some solutions to that. So if
My
anybody has,
last, my last word.
okay.
Parents, remember your children can get transition fatigue. They can get fatigued going back and forth, even if they enjoy both parents. It's a lot for a little person to have to find the grace and strength within them to do it with a good attitude. So remember, they too get fatigued going backwards and forwards. So
And I
thank
guess
you.
one more thing I
Especially
would say that is the issue of flexibility. I think that sometimes in co-parenting, the parents see the child as a commodity that they have entitlement to. And so they base, say the day is to go to dad's house, but it's a birthday party with a special relative at mom's house. Parents have to have some flexibility in adjusting the schedules. And I know that's very difficult when it's court mandated access visits and things like that. But a little bit of flexibility and understanding that this is a human being, it's not just a commodity that goes from
Mhm.
place to place is very, very important when you're looking at, transitions and things like that. This is a human being, feelings and emotions and things like, and connections to other people in each home that are valuable to maintain. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, that's a very, very big one. Definitely flexibility. Because like you said today, they don't want to, like, what if Christmas always falls with one parent, or you're missing your mom's birthday because, and those things, children might not immediately speak on them, but it impacts them and it can have like lifelong impacts. So thank you for sharing that, Dr. Pope. I did see a question about what is the path to obtain a litigation guardian. So I don't want that to be where you just think that you just go and get one. That's somebody that's going to communicate on behalf of your child. But this is usually when children are in court proceedings. If it is deemed necessary, like through the courts, that they need one, one will be appointed. So this is not like a continent or like a service that you like sign up into per se. But this is definitely like if you're dealing with things in court and they feel that one is needed to represent the child and have their voice heard, then that's how that will go. And then I just wanted to
yeah.
another. I see some specific scenarios.
So real
And I
quick,
think I'm
just
gonna.
Alicia, just to add to that. So basically, right now we're right in the middle of revamping our litigation guardian process, and so basically, as you stated, litigation guardians are appointed um, when there is a court proceeding between two parents or something like that, and there's too much contention to sort of figure out what the child's best needs are or what the child's wants are. And so basically, to prevent the child from getting lost in the shuffle and their voice not being heard, that's what a litigation guardian is appointed for. And those usually come when there is uh, sides are not being they're not seeing eye to eye and there's some contention. So that's usually how that works. And then what a litigation guardian just prepares a report once they have had enough time with a child and all of the people that they're involved with, and then they produce a report type of thing. So yeah.
Okay, thank you for expanding upon that. I do see in the comment, it's a very specific situation, and I'm gonna avoid this because it's like you're almost giving an example of something that's happened, but I don't feel that this would be an appropriate platform to speak without all of these pieces. It was a scenario, it was like a 7-year-old child, and like we're not gonna do that, but we will answer a more general question regarding co-parenting transitions that was asked. I just wanted to let the Raj tribe know that we're not ignoring, but I just don't think that specific situation would be safe to go with. So this is regarding co-parenting transitions. Should one guardian demand that this occur at their house when it is known that there is contention? Wouldn't a neutral public location make more sense? Asking because of known experience of even the court siding with transition to be where the demanding parent required. How is this child focused? So I don't know if Darren, you can speak from DCFS perspective on how to best go about the swap offs.
I usually what happens with transitions and when the courts are involved, basically, um, like I say, all of these things that we're touching on, they usually come with contention between the two parents. So when that is involved, um, they usually don't. They usually try to avoid one parent's house or the other, and then so some parents employ a transportation service. They might have a taxi driver or somebody that they employ to sort of make actually do that. But a lot of times, in my experience, it's done through school where the parents don't even
See.
um, have to even come into contact with each other. Drop off, pick up is at school, and also that gives another measure of um, uh, oversight or you know what I mean, monitoring. So basically, if it's done at school, usually there's a teacher or somebody there that can say, well, yeah, I saw his dad come for him, or I saw his mom come for him, or she didn't come, and then we had to go there, dad had to come, or whatever. There's usually schools are usually a really good place for that to take place.
Okay. So I want to ask about a bit of conflict. So now that we are talking about situations of contention, what happens if a conflict arises between two parents? What are some ways that they can maybe diffuse the situation or call for support with the situation?
Hmm. Um, I think it can be helpful instead of trying to avoid conflict, think about it in terms of minimizing conflict. Because if you're in the middle of kind of redefining your relationship, it's going to take some practice to move to a different way of doing things together. And some of the old issues may still be there. Some of this, old concerns may still be there. So if you can think about it, if you can only control yourself, thinking about at least slowing down so you have a chance to make a choice about how you want to show up here, starting with yourself, and how you want to participate in this interaction. Um, The other thing I immediately thought of was trying to minimize children's exposure to adult conflict if possible, so that they're not within hearing or they're not present for adult conflict where possible. It doesn't mean they don't know that you have problems, but they're not
And
involved
not in the middle of the problem.
and present for adult negotiation. And also preparation if possible. If you know there's a hard conversation that you need to have, you might have a chance to do some scheduling. It doesn't have to be a big deal. I just mean, do you have 15 minutes to just talk about something? You have a chance to prepare. And if you feel really stressed out in someone's presence, you have a chance to make a note and focus yourself on what's the problem you're wanting to solve. Because it's very easy to focus on the person when they're right in front of you instead of the problem.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I would
I
just
think minimizing the, I'm sorry.
Okay, I was just to add to Sharice, what Sharice is saying is that often we are so ready in our emotive state to have the conversation. We're calling the other parent in the middle of the day. They're at work, like we are getting them at the worst time to be able to discuss issues about children. And so,
Mhm.
you know, three points are like keep focused on what the point of the communication is about, and it should be child focused. What do you really want to communicate here, as opposed to maybe venting about the last 10 years of the relationship or what you saw them doing yesterday, or your assumptions about what is happening in now this new phase of maybe the other parent's life. And then two is to keep your cool. Because if we don't, how we cannot expect the other parent to respond in also a self-regulated way. Because if we already approach the conversation in a way that's not courteous, not cooperative, then we're never going to be able to get this a cooperative, courteous response back. So we tend to sort of share with our parents: keep focused, keep your cool, and stay as courteous as you possibly can as prevention measures leading into the communication that you need to have.
And if I could just add one more thing, if I know it's really hard, but if we can focus on solving the problem at hand, it's not a failure if you did not get an apology.
Yes,
It's not a failure
yes,
if they don't promise not to do it again. You
Lack
did
of that expectation, maybe.
right, like
yes,
you didn't fail if nobody's asking you for your forgiveness. Like if you got some problem solving around this drop off issue, and there is
Child
something
focus.
right, then yes, it's I don't even like to say the word winning. You can still have success, but it's not a failure if everybody's not happy, if everybody is still unhappy at the end. Because sometimes we want it all to be resolved. And they might be putting the bar really, really high for everybody.
Yeah,
And I
and I
think you
think
touched on a key
this
part.
that Judith touched on it earlier, but it's important in the non-conflictual times to have a care plan. So
Yeah.
at least you, when there are high emotions, you can redirect yourselves to the care plan. Look, can we revisit what we did agree upon on this particular topic? You know, before I saw you out with your boo last night, or whatever the case may be.
That's
So
the trigger.
care plan is, I mean, obviously, like you said, flexibility is always important, but the care plan does at least give us a framework and a roadmap for where we want to go, even in times of conflict. So if we can, work on that in the non-conflict times, then I think that will assist us when we need to be redirect ourselves.
Yes.
So for
And I
care
think
plans,
Cherise,
sorry, I just before we get into another
okay,
solution, Dr. Pip, I know that from birth to five, the child development program, they do assist and they have a template for care plans. Is that something that can be made public? Is that something that child family center might do with older children? But just for these parents who might be like, okay, well, what is a care plan, or how do I go about drafting one?
So actually, the document is actually a public document. You can find it online. It was part of the one that I'm utilizing that you're talking about is something that we used in our litigation guardian training. But basically, it looks at what are the critical points of contention that historically come up in co-parenting, and then having parents discuss those in non-high conflict times and make agreements as to how they will intervene in those particular high profile, high topic situations. And so, it's a template out there that we can definitely share, but it is also a tool that you can just put in co-parenting care plans on, and you can find documents online. But it's like each parent could just sit down. What are the major burns of contention? Is it religion? And how are we going to deal with religion? Or it said, I want my child to go to my alma mater and not that deadbeat school you went to. So all those things that we know in advance, we start talking about them and saying, this is how we're going to deal with these. And the care plan is not just for the moment, like it's for throughout the child's life. So any major issues and it avoids sometimes parents having to go to court and have courts dictate to you what the decisions are going to be, if you can have those conversations, not going to be all at the same time, bit by bit, when you're in moments where you can have that, healthy dialogue.
Okay.
And
Inspector Trot, I think you were trying to speak. Did you want to jump in now?
Dr. De Silva could go ahead.
You here?
She was trying to say
Okay.
something too. Yeah.
yeah, no, no, okay, thank you. No, I was just going to reiterate because both Darren Francis and Dr. Pope have brought up like the decision making categories, and we find that parents are often unclear. So it's I just almost feel like it's worth restating what's already been shared in terms of the three major areas of decision making for children that parents in shared custody or even with shared care and control must decide on together are education, religion, and health. And often parents come in with that, oh, I wasn't clear on that. Like I was just so happy to get through the process of of divorce or custody arrangements or whatever it is. And often that's a highly emotional time, and everything we're talking about today is really difficult to practice and do. It's like hearing bad news at the doctor's office. You almost then need later on to go to somebody and go, can you help me to decipher what this really means? So just because those examples have been brought up and they're good ones, and we find we have to repeat them to parents all the time, it's education, religion, and healthcare. Those need to be joint decision making things that should be on that care plan, which is an excellent tool that Dr. Popa brought up for parents to really think collectively about how they want to make the decisions for their children in those three areas.
Okay, Mr. Francis, did you have anything to add?
Sure. When it comes to co-parenting, typically when we're first starting out on this particular journey, it's the roughest time, like anything, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think parents should be minded that, okay, we're just starting this co-parenting process and it's going to be bumpy. So there has to be some allowances for miscommunication, uh, misunderstandings, whatever. And so there's there's likely to be a lot of emotional stuff still attached to the two parents when they start on this co-parenting journey. So sometimes you just have to stop yourself and be like, okay, no, this is, I'm not in a relationship with her anymore. I need to cut my emotional ties. So let me just fall back and be more level-headed. And we're emotional beings, and so sometimes it's hard for us to sort of get to that point where, okay, we're child focused because we're still so worried about the other parent. Sometimes I hear a lot of stuff like, oh, tell your mama got her own clothes. These are my clothes. I'm not sending them down the house. And so that is not a child focused particular, mindset. And a child focused mindset is, oh, can his mama or can her mama afford another set of clothes? Okay, cool. These are not my clothes per se. These are my child's clothes, and so they need them for school, and so they need to be prepared. And so, am I going to just be emotional and say no, they're not going down our house, or am I going to say, well, you know what? My child needs this stuff in order to be prepared for school the next day. My child needs requires XYZ. So even though um, I purchased these, they're going to go to her house. You know what I mean?
With the
And
child.
usually, and a lot of co-parenting requires one parent in whatever circumstance being the bigger parent. Sometimes I'm going to have to say to myself, I'm going to be the bigger person, and I'm just going to allow a particular circumstance. And at the same time, you have to determine the risk. If I give some of my time to the other parent when I don't really want to, because maybe this parent has something they want to do with the child or whatnot, and they're saying, "Well, I need X, I need him to come X, Y, Z," and I'm like, "Nah, it's my time or whatever." Um, if a, or even if a parent withholds, you know what I mean, they pick them up after school, and no, you're not getting them. Sometimes, rather than no, I'm getting my child. Sometimes you have to say, well, if this parent, if the other parent retains an extra night or whatnot, is the child at risk? Is it a risky household or whatnot? So you have to determine the risk level to determine how how aggressive or how determined you're going to be to deal with the situation. And so it's just a matter of just taking a deep breath and understanding that it's it's my child that I'm talking about. It's not the other parent. And sometimes it just takes a few minutes, a few seconds, sorry, to just calm yourself down and remember that. And you know what I mean? I'll be the bigger parent. I might have to pay an extra couple dollars, sir. I may, if I'm got it like that, then yeah, I'm gonna do that. So yeah.
And I also think an important part is to remember that co-parenting, the clue is in the word co, which means together. I think so often somebody's trying to win in some way, shape, or form for some reason. They want to win the argument. They want to win more love from the child. They want to win this. They want to win that. But you're not trying to. You're trying to help the child to win. You're not trying to win as a parent. So I think if we remember that co-parenting means together, we want the best for the child. It'll take away that thing. And like Darren was saying, sometimes you just have to say, "All right, cool. You know what? Let me calm down." And so often because of the other conflicts that are a part of it, it's nothing to do with the child. I would say 95% of the times that I'm been to incident, obviously as a police officer, and I'm dealt with things myself as well as a parent because I co-parent. It's often nothing to do with the child or the issue. It's all the other stuff in the background that adds to it. So I think what if we realize, all right, cool, you know what? It's not about winning. I don't want to win this argument. I don't want to win this fight. I don't want to win this. I just want to help my child to win. Then I think that'll help us to remain focused and deal with that conflict and say, okay, cool. Maybe I need 5 minutes. All right, you know what? I'm at work right now. I can't respond. So maybe we could talk later. Or, okay, cool. Oh, well, thank you for bringing that to my attention. Let me just process it and I'll get back to you later. Because sometimes in the heat of the emotion, in the heat of the moment, when emotions are running high, then that's when
Yeah,
we
caught
as the
up.
police have to end up there because somebody's arguing or somebody's fussing at you. Do the last thing you want, and I think it's very important, is to keep as much as when those conflicts arise and they get to a point where it's not manageable, keep that away from the children as much as possible. Yes, you want children to be able to deal with conflict, but they shouldn't be a part of the process when the parents are in conflict. So yes, look, you might say after, okay, yes, mommy and daddy, let's say a child wants to, I don't know, go swimming. And all right, well, let me just speak to your mom about it because you just got your hair done yesterday, so we have a discussion about it. And then tell the child, okay, look, daddy wants to take you to the beach. Mommy said that probably not best because you start school tomorrow, your hair just got done, so we agreed that but you're not going to go swimming today. So even though there might be some disagreement or conflict, once you guys make a decision as parents, you can relate that to the child so that the child understands that yes, we had a disagreement or we had a discussion, or because children are not dumb. We think children are, but children see exactly what's going on. So I think a lot of times we have to remember that and understand that regardless of whatever conflicts we have, we teach them, okay, well, we didn't agree on this. However, this is the
A
decision we came
joint
up with together,
decision.
and this
Yeah.
is what we're gonna do. This is what we're going to do together as your parents. And the child might not like it. The child might be upset. But if we go back to what I said earlier about trying to win, if I'm trying to win as daddy, I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to take her to the beach. She's going to be happy I took her to the beach. And then tomorrow morning, what I'm going to do when I got to send her to school? Her hair is all over the place because got sand all in her hair. I can't do it the way that it needs to be done. So I think a lot of times we have to understand that it's co, meaning joint, for the best interest of the child.
It's
And I
important
think
for
that
them to see you making those joint decisions. So I'm glad that you really isolated the co and co-parenting. What were you gonna share, Dr. Pooper?
I was going to say that I'm so glad he said that, and I think that so that people know that we're really reality based. There is the whole issue that we're not discussing today of parallel parenting, and
Yes.
that's when the code drops right out of the parenting, and there is no way
Okay.
that these parents can see eye to eye. So I just want the listeners to know that even though we're not discussing it today, we recognize that there are some impossible situations where you can't even put code next to parenting, and that's when we have the whole issue of parallel parenting. And it's really a lot of the times where you find the couples are in court and everything is being prescribed by the courts so that there's no need for communication. There's no real big wiggle room for discussions and all of that. So for some families, unfortunately, that is the best interest of the child to have the parallel parenting. A lot of times with a mediator in the middle where the child is dropped off somewhere and picked up because the relationships between the parents are just so contentious. So I just want to acknowledge that that is a concept that exists for parents who might be thinking,
Yeah.
well, why can't I co-parent? The fact is some people can't. And so parallel parenting will be the way to go.
I just have a simple thought that I would like to leave in the minds of parents who are listening, who are co parenting. It's very simple, right? It's something you do before you hit anything else outside of yourself. This is a question you need to ask yourself. You need to decide how much tension you want to have your child experience and how much tension you yourself want to experience. Because unless you can sort that out from the beginning, every heated or potentially heated discussion that comes is going to be problematic. In other words, I'm asking parents to find a spot in their own temperament of understanding what is it I can cope with, what is it I cannot cope with, and let me, as Dr. Popa said, be reality based. I can't cope with this. I can't cope with that. I can cope with this. And so the thing you can cope with, let it be your strength. Continue to strengthen yourself until you find the wherewithal, as Darren explained. You know, co parenting can be new. If you're in the first phase of it, it takes a lot for it to move through. The middle stage may not get any cooler, but at some point, people do get tired. So if at the beginning you can purpose in your thoughts how much tension you are going to allow either yourself or your child to experience, that will help you not to go any further than you're willing to go. Because sometimes we are putting ourselves in contentious situations because we have not done the single minded work that we should do before we step into these situations or step into the presence of someone who is bound to wind up in some form of disagreement or move into full on conflict. So that's what my simple thought is. Preparation for going through co parenting is very, very important. Very important. What you do on the onset. Because if you have a child, that means you're already a parent. If you are a parent, you have been parenting. You're not doing anything new. You're now just having to widen your scope to deal with the same problems in larger formats.
Thank you, Miss Brooks. I'm gonna ask one final question because I know we can talk all day if you really wanted to. But for those, we discussed conflict. What are some legal ramifications that can, affect custody or access or different things, maybe as a way to deter some parents? But just to be realistic of what can happen if we go down a route that, like you said, is not in the best interest of the welfare of the child.
Hmm. Well, legal ramifications could be well. Getting into getting into our organization, you know what I mean? Becoming involved with myself or my coworkers at here at Child and Family Services, and then getting to a court process. So a legal ramification could be so parents' rights, parents' custodial rights um, aren't usually taken away. There has to be some seriously extreme situation for a parent's custodial rights to be taken away, or the parent says that they don't want to be a parent anymore. They don't want those rights. They give their rights to the other parent or whatever, and then you get it to court, and that's ratified or whatnot, or maybe it may not be. Depends. But there's always a risk you take in terms of um, getting into court and it not going the way how you figured it would be going. You know what I mean? So, like I said, rights are never really taken away. However, care and control can be placed with one parent, and you might have to. So the other parent might have to complete a parenting assessment. You know what I mean? Dr. De Silva can speak to these things. There may be a parenting assessment you have to complete. You might have to complete a psychological assessment, a psychiatric assessment. There are different assessments that you might have to complete in order for you to get your time back with your child, rather that be having access an hour a week or a couple hours a week, whether that means full reinstatement in terms of having week on, week off or whatnot. But you definitely run the risk of losing out, legally losing out with having that time with your child. But I would suggest that the legal ramifications are not as severe to the emotional ramifications that come along with these particular circumstances.
Yeah, I echo what Darren said. That was, I was going to say, if you had asked us for a final thought, that would have been it right there. Even with the legal things in terms of what the courts, set out with two parents, that stuff's even going to go away when they become adults, right? And they're no longer dependent on you. But what never goes away is their mental health, is their identity, is who are they today, and what have they internalized when they were younger, through watching all of this conflict continue to go on and play out in front of them. And just thinking about Dr. Popa's story earlier on, about the 6-year-old who is, going to do something drastic, feeling like, well, maybe my parents will stop fighting because I love them so much. I care about them so much. I want them to stop fighting. Maybe if I disappear, then they will. Those are the sorts of things that will stay with us as human beings for the rest of our lives. So before thinking about legal battles and all sorts of things, thinking about what is it that we do every day through the transitions, through what everybody has said, through the of co-parenting, through what everybody has said, think about that and how that impacts the child's
Yes.
identity, self-worth, and self-esteem, because it is our job to build that up in them.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, if anyone else wants to give kind of closing thoughts, I know we can talk about this topic all day, but I recognize that you have places to go, people to see. But yeah, I'll just allow you to have opportunity to kind of just wrap us up.
I would just like to finally say that a lot of the co-parenting we've discussed thus far has been two-parent households, but it was articulated earlier in this discussion that it can be two parents that like each other, love each other in the same household that may have two different parenting styles. You know what I mean? And so I think it's important that even if you have an intact family, that you are quite aware of how you parent versus how another parent parents. Usually, the circumstances are dealt with a little more. The more feasible, it's more feasible to deal with those situations than when you have two contentious situations, two households, and just always remember that it's the child's best welfare that we have to put paramount. And a lot of times when we have situations when a parent is not necessarily thinking of the child's best welfare is when they're emotionally charged. And I think it's kind of easy to determine when you're in that particular point. And it's very, very, very important that you give yourself a minute. And not just with co-parenting in life, period. Give yourself a minute, have a second thought, and determine whether or not you're making the best decision for your child and for your child's, mental, emotional, and physical health.
I guess the last word I want to say is around remaining child focus. Seriously, child focus. Um, your child's identity comes from both of you, whoever the both is. It's the carers who's caring directly, daily for this child. Their identity comes from you. And Dr. De Silva has talked about the mental health aspect in her last statement and the importance of it. So if you casually throw in the air, you are just like so and so, only when it's negative, you keep canceling that child's self and their identity. And sometimes, by time these children come to see someone like myself or child, the family center or child and adolescent services or their school counselor, we are sitting there struggling to figure out how to help this child have a sense of self. No identity. They can't identify with anything because of the way their carers have reacted around them. Carers need to be more responsive, less reactive, and child focused or child centered to protect and be proactive in protecting the child themselves.
Thank you,
If
Sharif.
I had a last thought, I guess it would be, because we cannot anticipate everything. We can anticipate our reactions sometimes to situations, or we can anticipate things that might happen. Part of that whole being responsive, it could take a lot of pressure off. If what you got in coming to this was a lot of suggestions on things to do and how to support children, is to also work on your repair skills and work on your apologizing skills, because it will take them. You don't have to do everything right. You don't have to do everything right if you can acknowledge that maybe if you're learning how to do this along at the same time as your child is learning how to be a child in this new kind of family, that you might have to apologize sometimes or try to do something differently the next time. It actually allows you to not be perfect and not have to try to soak up all of this at once and go and lead this now and try to do everything that you heard right now. If you can also just keep apologizing skills in your pocket or build them.
That's a good jam. That's a good jam. Inspector, do you have any final
I
words
get
for us?
I guess my final words is to encompass everything everybody said is communicate. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, but always strive to do better and put the child first. Very simple, straightforward. I think we had a good discussion today, but yeah, communicate. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, but try to do better and put the child first or children first.
Yeah. Well, thank you, panelists, for joining us. It was another amazing discussion, and so many gems were shared, right? So I hope that those who are watching can find value. Like you said, don't try to go out today and do all of the things, but give yourself that grace to grow through parenting and share with your community if they missed it. So if you have a friend, family member, cousin, auntie, sister, girlfriend, somebody, go ahead and share with them so that we can strengthen our community collectively. Next up is going to be the Parenting Expo on November 10th. It's going to be on the front lawn of City Hall from 11 to 2. School is out on November 10th, so if you want to bring your children by, we're trying to have a fun zone, a little fun castle, we're trying to have some entertainment, some Bermuda's own entertainment. So it's going to be a good day. Different organizations and agencies will be there to say, hey, this is who we are. This is our engagement with children. Here are some of the resources we have. And parents, you can ask questions directly. So I know sometimes the internet or going through email and phone may seem a bit impersonal. So this is an opportunity to come in person and connect. And then next month, we'll have our last two panel discussions for the series. On November 17th, we're going to discuss personal care and wellness. And then on November 24th, we will discuss nutrition and meal planning. So tell a friend to tell a friend. And if anyone has any questions, you can be reached at askus@gov.bm. So until next time, to our lovely panelists and Bermuda, be well. We will see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Solid.